The winds of change are blowing in the ruling party, in the government and in the country.
They believe they could use technicalities in parliament. We represent the majority in the public.
They indicated one thing and one thing only, that they're a guarantor for our democracy. They understand it better, in fact, than people who are serving in the state organs.
I think he needs to be a president. Those who said he must step down, no.
To us, he's an innocent man. He's a champion for economic transformation of this country. President Zuma represents the majority of the people of this country who remain in poverty, whom we believe.
A good time, perhaps, to look back at the legacy, good and bad, of Jacob Zuma as the ANC president and as the president of South Africa. Many have called him South Africa's most colourful and controversial president, but Jacob Zuma is much beyond just that. He was born into poverty, went into exile to fight apartheid, before rising to become the people's president. Zuma swept to power on the 9th of May 2009, largely due to his charisma. His popular touch was in stark contrast to Thabo Mbeki's aloofness. Just about 11 years ago, he had defeated Thabo Mbeki as the head of the ANC at the highly contested Polokwane conference.
During that time, the mantra was, you needed tried and tested leaders. And you needed somebody who met those standards. And the standards meant in the ANC that you either had been to jail or you had been to exile and you've been an activist. And Mbeki was a formidable character. And then the ANC delegates realized that there's only one person who meets all that criteria of tried and tested. And he had one advantage: he had been to jail, but he had not been to exile, and he was also head of intelligence, and he had worked with people like O.R. Tambo. So he himself could match Mbeki. And at the time, Mbeki also had risen to a stage where he was very aloof.
Zuma's tryst with controversies is not new. In June 2005, it was Mbeki who fired Zuma as deputy president, citing allegations of corruption related to his financial advisor, Schabir Shaik. But like the proverbial phoenix that rises from the ashes, Zuma defeated Mbeki to become the ANC president just about 2 years later.
And Mbeki realized that this is a man who I brought in not to make him the next president. And then he used the pretext of a case where Zuma was mentioned unfavorably. Then he decided to fire him. For most people, they realized that he was actually using and abusing state institutions and abusing his power to remove a person that he was uncomfortable with. So that led to the groundswell that later was called by people like Vavi a tsunami. So the firing, he came out as somebody who has been victimized for being who he is. So that firing backfired.
Zuma rode to power based on strong support from the grassroots, trade unions and the communists. His Zulu antecedents and colorful demeanor endeared him to the masses. Zuma himself ensured that the carefully crafted image remained intact. He even left no opportunity to capitalize on his history as a guerrilla fighter. His anthem, at one point, translated "Bring me my machine gun," portrayed him as a man of action to his supporters. Here's a look at Zuma's legacy as a fighter. He was a member of the Umkhonto weSizwe ANC's military arm. Convicted of conspiring to overthrow South Africa's government, He spent 10 years in prison on Robben Island, lived in exile for 15 years in several African countries, re-established ANC's underground structures in the then Natal between 1974 and 1975. He headed the ANC intelligence department when it was battling infiltration.
Zuma, on the other hand, was seen as a man of the people. He was able to relate with the unions, was able to relate with people who were in the rural areas, he was able to relate with traditional leaders, so he was able to craft that image of a man of the people, and which he has actually remained, because nobody can accuse Jacob Zuma of having been a president who was aloof. Even when he goes to rural areas, he is able to find comfort with ordinary people.
By the time his second term as president came about, Zuma was battling a slew of allegations, primary among them security upgrades at his Nkandla homestead. But controversies and scandals never stopped Zuma's ride to glory. He was elected for a second term as president in 2014, despite the challenge of anti-incumbency and the Nkandla affair. The last 1 year has been conspicuous by the growing calls for Zuma's exit, both from within and outside the party. State capture allegations, the 783 corruption charges, and the controversy surrounding Zuma have all but overshadowed some solid achievements of his administration. The advances made by ANC government are hidden behind the negative and personalized commentary that dominates the discourse.
I think that there are numerous achievements, and I think at the top of mind is his free education proclamation, as well as his celebration of women leadership within the ANC. And he's the one leader who has effected ANC policies on women advancement, far more so than his predecessors. And I think what he's done, even if he leaves before his term, which I don't think is going to happen, he leaves behind a legacy of RET with strong momentum on land expropriation without compensation, on free education, on the nationalization of key resources within the financial sector. So whether he leaves or not, I think we have a very strong mark of President Zuma within the ANC moving forward, and it's based on policy, effective policies, of fast tracking of RET policies. And I think that is a very big gift to the new president of the country, because he has set a very useful and very strong foundation for RET moving forward.
Here's a brief look at Zuma's legacy as the President of South Africa. Successful, life-saving extension of HIV/AIDS medication and treatment. Launched HIV counseling and testing campaign in 2010. Announced free higher education for poor and working class students. Expanded the school feeding scheme to benefit millions of children. Signed a record number of SIU proclamations to interrogate corruption. Ensured state procurement spend helps small black businesses. Constituted National Planning Commission to develop a long-term strategic vision for South Africa. Repositioned South Africa geopolitically by aligning with BRICS. Ask Jacob Zuma what he would want to be remembered for most during his tenure as state president, and he says that he cannot choose for the people. In an interview with ANN7 in November 2017, much before he gave up the mantle of ANC president, here's what he said in response to that question.
There was this fellow who came from Nkandla, in the rural areas, joined the struggle at a young age, went all out, ready to die, and with time developed in the ANC through the ranks, and finally reached the level of leadership. And when he was part of the leadership, there are quite a number of things that happened that he was involved in. People will remember whatever. I can't choose for them.
Among one of the remarkable achievements of the ANC government under Zuma is the National Development Plan, a long-term plan for South Africa's development with a vision for social reconstruction.
I did everything I could within my power and capacity to help implement the policies of the ANC, to bring about a lot of things that I thought were needed to be brought. I introduced new departments, quite a number of them. We have been talking about rural development, and I thought talking about it, not doing anything about it, was not helping. It was important to focus, and therefore established a department. But I also implemented what had always been my view, that as a country we need a plan that is overarching of the country, and worked for the National Development Plan, and succeeded to have it the manner in which we have, so that the country, whatever, all of us, whatever we do, we know where we are going, what is our objectives.
Not that the NDP, like most government-led programs, has not been criticized. Many have called it a vision without a concrete plan. But others praise the blueprint that it provides for South Africa's Vision 2030.
So what he did in his first term as the ANC leader, he successfully managed to bring back life into the NDP. And thanks to the involvement then of COSATU as well as the SACP being the forces that pushed that to happen. And we saw the health system, the health policies, and the delivery of basic needs in the country like water, sanitation, as well as electricity, which are programs of the NDP. They were taken care of. And I think the Zuma administration has done very well in rolling out what was planned within the National Development Plan.
More recently, the ANC's call for radical economic transformation under Zuma's leadership has been hailed as the panacea for apartheid-era injustices. The call to integrate black majority in the economic mainstream has seen many rally behind Zuma. Proposals such as land expropriation without compensation and free higher education, among others, were adopted as ANC policy under his leadership.
He leaves behind a legacy of RET with strong momentum on land expropriation without compensation, on free education, on the nationalization of key resources within the financial sector. So whether he leaves or not, I think we have a very strong mark of President Zuma within the ANC moving forward, and it's based on effective policies, a fast tracking of RET policies. And I think that is a very big gift to the new president of the country, because he has set a very useful and very strong foundation for RET moving forward.
Is the issue of radical economic transformation. And when he talked about it, he says, let's look at the patterns of ownership. Let's look at the patterns of control of the economy. Let's look at the management. He says it cannot be right that 23 years later, the household family, white household, earns more income, is 5 times that of a black household. And he looked at expenditure of government, and he found that government resources go largely to white companies. And he says from now on, every major project in government, 30% of it must go to black hands, so that we begin to de-racialize the economy. So you're talking about somebody with a plan. And yet, if you go back to the previous people who had the benefit of education, what you found is that they didn't even have these plans. But the challenge that with Zuma has been more personal than policy.
However, in his November 2017 interview with ANN7, Zuma firmly placed the credit for the party's radical socio-economic transformation call with the movement.
For me, talking about radical socio-economic transformation, it's not that I'm talking about my thing. I'm talking about the policy of the ANC. In other words, sharpening the implementation of the policies of the ANC. Not that I want this to be my legacy. It's a legacy of the ANC. I think what would be important is that perhaps at a given time, the ANC decided to say we need radical socio-economic transformation as the ANC. We as cadres, once the resolution is taken, we've got to implement it. And if I'm the president, I've got to lead that. That is why when we went to Mangaung, we had to crystallize this. And of course, for some time, people did not necessarily highlight it that much. And at a particular time, I thought it was important as a leader to clarify this as much as possible. That is why I even tried to define it so that people must know what is it that we are talking about. Members of the ANC must be clear, what is it that we are talking about? What is that we want to do? But the country as well must be clear that this is not a weird policy. It's a policy to correct the past. So it is absolutely crucial. And the ANC must follow this policy. Because if you don't, you are going to stay in poverty, in inequality for a long time.
Zuma's announcement of free higher education ahead of the December conference took many in the ANC by surprise. Many called the timing of the announcement suspect, but perhaps Zuma had recognized the writing on the wall. Perhaps, unsure of his successor, Zuma delivered on the promise that he had made to South African youth.
It is a masterstroke because Zuma will go into retirement as a former president, having made sure that he has delivered free tertiary education to the needy students and needy families of this country who have been excluded from tertiary education because they cannot raise the money to pay for the fees. So that declaration already gives Zuma immortality. It gives Zuma access into the legendary book of records. His legacy will go down as a legacy that will always idolize him as a person who made sure that he delivered free basic education and free tertiary education to the needy students of South Africa.
Another less hailed but crucial legacy of Zuma's administration remains the alignment of South Africa with the BRICS community. The inclusion in the group of the fastest growing economies in the world has opened many more doors for South Africa than ever before.
What the BRICS alignment does, it gives also South Africa another opportunity. First, it's about the markets. We no longer have to rely only on the West, whether it's with the West as places where we export our material, but what it opens is also people who may want to invest in South Africa. So we are actually saying we're open for business, whether it comes from the West, whether it comes from the East. And President Zuma was very clear about that. He was saying we are not replacing one with the other, but what we're doing, we're saying the various groupings and alignments that we have must complement each other so that we advance South Africa. So for him, the primary issue is South Africa's economic and social development.
But as stated earlier, Zuma's achievements as a leader of the state and the ruling party have been completely overshadowed amidst a flood of controversies and allegations surrounding him.
Frames so that this matter is speedily resolved. So the NEC received feedback from the delegation that the president was once more pleading that this time is too short. And therefore, in his wisdom, the NEC decided as follows. One, to recall his deployee, Comrade Jacob Zuma, in accordance with Rule 12.2, Rule 12.2, 21.2 of the ANC Constitution, which accords the NEC the authority to recall its deployees. There should be continuing, we agreed also that there should be continuing interaction between officials of the ANC and President Jacob Zuma.
I've also been disturbed by the instances of violence that have occurred because of the different views among members of our organization outside our headquarters, Luthuli House. No life should be lost in my name, and also the ANC should never be divided in my name. I have therefore come to the decision to resign as President of the Republic with immediate effect. Even though I disagree with the decision of the leadership of my organization, I have always been a disciplined member of the ANC.
And every person, whatever be her or his rank or condition, is subject to the ordinary realm of the law and amenable to the jurisdiction of its tribunals.
Respect and decorum. Over to you.
I didn't mean to be disrespectful.
That's fine. Please carry on.
I'm not scared of going to jail for my beliefs. It will not be for the first time. I will be a prisoner of conscience.
Any nation where there remain only two choices: submit or fight.